By April 1861, the issue of slavery split the country and led to a civil war between the North and South. Women on both sides of the conflict worked for the war effort, doing more unladylike things. They prepared and delivered supplies to the soldiers. They lived in tents on the battlefield and fed and nursed the wounded. Some women became spies. A few even dressed as men and fought in battle. On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It freed over 3 million black men, women, and children in slavery, but it did not free enslaved African Americans everywhere in the United States. When the North won the war, the suffragists set out to change that. They held meetings and started a letter-writing campaign. They collected more than 400,000 signatures in support of abolition. On January the 31st, 1865, the U.S. Congress passed the 13th Amendment, ending slavery everywhere in the United States. Then the lawmakers began debating giving the vote to black men. Now, Elizabeth thought, now is our chance to get the vote too. But they didn't. So the suffragists kept on traveling and making speeches, and Susan B. racked up the most speeches, more than 75 each year for 45 years. Even people who opposed women voting agreed that Lucy Stone, too, was an especially great speaker. But the lawmakers didn't listen. Sojourner tried to vote in Battle Creek, Michigan, and was turned away. Susan B. was arrested and fined. When she went to the polls in Rochester, New York, she refused to pay. Then, hooray for Wyoming! In 1869, women won the right to vote there. Next, in Kansas, then Colorado, Utah, and Idaho, and then in Washington, California, Arizona, and Oregon. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. and Lucy Stone and Lucretia and Sojourner grew old and died. New women continued the fight. Alice Paul and Lucy Burns were fed up. 69 years had passed since Elizabeth read her declaration, and women could vote only in 9 states. No more speeches, Lucy said. No more trying to win over male lawmakers. It was time to do something different to get attention. So the suffragists held a parade. On March 3, 1913, a day before President Wilson's inauguration, 8,000 women marched down the streets of Washington, D.C. Following them were 26 floats, 10 bands, 4 mounted brigades, 3 heralds, and 6 chariots. Angry spectators shouted ugly names and shoved them. Soldiers had to be called in to stop the attacks. Even people who didn't believe that women should be allowed to vote were outraged at the treatment of the marchers. The suffragists kept on marching and talking to the lawmakers. More lawmakers listened. Hooray for Montana and Nevada! Hooray for New York! Hooray for Michigan, South Dakota, and Oklahoma! On January the 10th of 1917, the suffragists started picketing in front of the White House. In rain and snow and blistering heat, they stood silently with their signs. Angry mobs attacked them. The police did nothing to protect them, nor did they arrest any of their attackers. In the next 11 months, more than 200 women were arrested for picketing. Almost 100 women served time in prison. Alice Paul was sentenced to 7 months and thrown into solitary confinement for 2 weeks with nothing to eat but bread and water. Lucy Burns and 40 other women were beaten. Other suffragists took their places in front of the White House. Newspapers wrote about the brutal treatment of the women. Support for their cause grew. A judge finally ruled that the arrests were unconstitutional and ordered the women freed. A year after the women started picketing, President Wilson declared his support for an amendment to the Constitution giving women the right to vote. On August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote, became law. The lawmakers had finally done what Abigail Adams wanted the Founding Fathers to do in that big room in Philadelphia so long ago. The women had triumphed after battling for the vote for 72 years. But they knew their work was not over. There were still many unfair laws to change so that women could have true equality with men. And we're still working on it.